It was early 2017 and it was my wife and I's 7-year anniversary. I wanted to do something special and extravagant. I knew my wife had always wanted to take a cruise up somewhere beautiful, so that's exactly what I got for us. I booked us tickets for a week-long cruise that would depart from Vancouver and end in Alaska. It was a great opportunity to see some of the glaciers and other wonders around that part of Alaska. Fast forward to the third day of the cruise. It was night, and my wife and I had just returned to our cabin after a long day of exquisite meals, sightseeing, and partaking in many of the ship's different activities. Once we got inside the cabin and collapsed into bed, it was then that my heart sank. I began frantically checking all my pockets in a panic as the harsh reality sunk in. I had left my phone at the bar. I told my wife and said I was going back for it. She offered to come with me, but I could tell just by looking at her that she was exhausted. I told her I'd be fine. I made my way out of the suites and into the large entertainment center, which was still bustling with people well past midnight. I found the exact bar we had been at and asked the bartender about a lost phone. Luck was on my side that night. The bartender had seen my phone and placed it beneath the counter for safekeeping. I thanked him multiple times as he returned it to me, and I was on my way back to the suites. However, I must have taken a wrong turn at some point because I literally couldn't find our cabin. I started checking the numbers on each of the doors to see how close I was to finding mine, but come to think of it, I couldn't remember my room number. I began mentally beating myself up as I was walking up and down these long hallways, just looking for something familiar. I knew there was a large red abstract painting on the wall just a few doors down from my room, but I couldn't find it anywhere. That place was like a labyrinth of hallways that all looked the exact same. There was also no one else in sight. My room was in the lower deck suites. I figured I must have taken a wrong turn and ended up in the rear suites or something, so I decided to just keep walking straight until I hit a doorway to another section of the ship or an elevator or something. Well, eventually I did hit a large doorway. I pushed open these two double doors, but immediately I could tell they did not lead to another section of the suites. Before me was a set of steel stairs leading down into darkness. I could hear machinery moving from within that darkness. I decided to see if there was a staff member down there or something. Once I hit the bottom of the stairs, I was faced with a long, narrow, dimly lit hallway. I could hear machinery whirring and clanking from the other end of the hall. Near the far end of the hall, in a section that was partly unlit, I could see a figure standing with their back to me. It was a creepy sight to say the least. I figured if they were down here, though, that they had to have been an employee. I called out, "Hello?" At first they gave no reaction, but then they slowly turned around. There was a few seconds of us just staring at each other, before the figure began full-on sprinting towards me. At first, I didn't move. I was unsure of what to do. As the person began moving beneath the lights and closer to me, I could see that he had this manic look on his face. His eyes were open wide as ever, and he really looked like he was running as fast as possible. Not sure what this guy's intentions were, I turned around and ran too. I was halfway up the stairs and I started hearing this crazy laugh echoing towards me. I burst out of the double doors and didn't stop running. I took one look back as I was about to turn down another hallway. I saw the man with this creepy smile just pressing his face up against the window on the doors and watching me run away. I didn't stop running until I made it back out into the entertainment area, which was still packed with people. From there, I was able to accurately retrace my steps from the bar back to the red abstract painting into my room. I made sure to memorize my room number once I got there. My wife was fast asleep as I got in, so thankfully I wouldn't have to explain what took me so long. I just crashed into bed after that. The rest of our cruise went smoothly and we had lots of fun and made lots of memories. Although I couldn't stop thinking about that weird guy who had charged at me in that creepy hallway. I was really paranoid during the rest of the cruise we'd run into him somehow, but we didn't, thank God. Over Thanksgiving break last year, my whole family went on a cruise together. It was me, my two brothers, my parents, my aunt and uncle from both sides, and our three cousins. I was the middle child in my family. My oldest brother Chase was 16 at the time. I was 14, and my younger brother Aiden was 12. Our three cousins were Carson, Liam, and Sebastian, and they were 14, 13, and 16 respectively. We all drove down to Los Angeles the morning of the cruise. It departed from Long Beach and would be stopping on Catalina Island in Baja, California. I believe it would be a week and a half or a week. I don't really remember. I'll skip the unnecessary details of what we did on the cruise ship up until the scary night. Basically, what my family had done was rent out two large suites right next to each other, one for the adults to sleep in and one for the kids to sleep in. I think this was mainly so they could drink wine and have dinner in their suite every night without us pestering them. But that was fine by us since we all got along well and it was an excuse for us to hang out around the cruise without having to tell them where we were going. In hindsight, though, it probably wasn't the best idea to leave us unsupervised like that. Anyways, to the scary night. It was like 11:30 at night or something, and us kids were just chilling in the cabin, listening to the ruckus next door from our drunken parents. Carson, Liam, and Aiden, the younger group, wanted to go to the ship's arcade. The one rule my parents had set for us was that if the younger kids wanted to go anywhere, either me, Chase, or Sebastian would have to accompany them. Of course, me being the youngest out of Chase and Sebastian, they often pawned off this responsibility on me. Like that night. So I was leading Carson, Liam, and Aiden across the deck that night towards the arcade, which was closer to the bow. The ocean sounds were loud and relaxing, as well as the cool night air and the sights around us. This cruise, believe it or not, was a particularly smaller, cheaper one, so there was just less people around even during the day. At night, the deck was a complete ghost town. Well, apart from one lone figure sitting on a lounge chair near the railing. As we got closer to this figure, I saw he was a rather skinny man wearing a coat and a hat, seemingly staring at the ground. It was too dark to make out any other features. I thought he looked kind of sketchy. We would have to walk right past him. I just made sure Carson, Liam, and Aiden were close to me as we walked by. I was kind of watching him out of the corner of my eye as we passed him, but he didn't seem to move. Just as I was breathing a sigh of relief when we got past him, we heard his voice behind us. "Hey." It was a really low voice, almost like he was mumbling. We all turned around to see him standing up and walking towards us. He was freakishly tall. He had to have been like 6'5" or something. My heart was practically pounding out of my chest as he got closer, his black fedora pulled down, obscuring his face. He stopped when he was about 5 feet away from us and produced 3 open pocket knives from his coat pocket, holding them towards us with a lanky, outstretched arm as if he was offering them to us. "Trying to buy one," he said in that same low voice. I could barely manage to choke the words out. No, we're good." He didn't respond. He just stuffed the knives back in his pocket and slowly turned around and walked off. We watched him until he rounded a corner and vanished farther down the deck. "What the hell was that?" Carson asked. "I don't know. Let's go," I said, and we continued walking to the arcade. The three of them were exploding with questions. How'd he even get those on the ship? Do you think he's dangerous? I ignored them as we arrived at the arcade and kind of let them do their own thing. The place was pretty much deserted. I was just sitting in a chair near the entrance on my phone for the first 5 minutes or so. Then I started playing one of those NBA basketball shooting arcade games when I heard the automatic doors behind me sliding open. Out of instinct, I turned around to see the creepy knife salesman from earlier skulking inside. I instantly turned around and searched the arcade for a bit. Thankfully, Carson, Liam, and Aiden were all together. I told them we had to leave. They whined and moaned, but still followed me out of the arcade. The entire time we were walking back to our cabin, I was glancing around in search of that man. I didn't see him anywhere, though. We made it back to the cabin without issue. I didn't have to explain anything to the younger kids about why we left so early because they just ran off to watch TV the second we got back. I made sure to lock the door, though. A few minutes later, my mom, dad, and my aunt and uncle on my mom's side came into our room to put everyone to bed. After they left, Sebastian and I remained awake on the couch. He was on his laptop and I was just watching TV. At this point, it was well past midnight. At some point, I got up to grab a snack, and when I got back, it seemed the remote was missing. At first, I accused Sebastian of taking it, but it seemed he was telling the truth about not having it. I started removing cushions off the couch, when all of a sudden, I heard Sebastian screaming at the top of his lungs. At first, I wasn't afraid. I was more confused to see Sebastian stumbling backwards. But then, I looked down. There was a man crawling out from underneath the couch. At first, I was in a sort of shock as he crawled out and began standing up, until Sebastian tackled him. This snapped me out of it, and I assisted Sebastian in subduing the man while screaming for our parents. At this point, Carson, Liam, Aiden, and Chase were all awake and watching us. Chase ran to get our parents from the other suite as me and Sebastian had the guy pinned. Long story short, our entire family came and called the front desk, who sent a bunch of security guys up, and the man was handcuffed and taken away. It turned out he wasn't even a passenger, just some random guy who had somehow snuck onto the ship. It also turned out he had a number of mental disorders. He was kept locked somewhere in the crew's quarters and guarded until the ship made an emergency stop back to LA. Then the police took him away somewhere, either to a prison or a mental hospital. He had managed to sneak into our suite before I returned with the kids from the arcade somehow. Either Sebastian or Chase had left the door unlocked, and the security cameras revealed they were both in other rooms when the man entered and crawled under the couch, where he stayed for the next hour while everyone went to bed and me and Sebastian were still sitting on the couch. It was sickening. We ended up getting a refund for both the suites, but we left the day the ship was docked back at LA. None of the kids were comfortable remaining on the ship. To this day, it's a horrifying experience everyone in my family still remembers. I don't know what that guy was planning on doing, but he definitely wasn't right in the head. After I graduated college, to celebrate, me and a group of buddies went on a no-destination cruise around the Gulf of Mexico, because we're a bunch of rich pricks. Well, the vacation ended up being a complete nightmare for me, and you'll soon find out why. It all started on the second night of the cruise. Me and my friends hit the bar and I ended up getting way too wasted. Like so much so that I could barely see, let alone walk. It got to the point where a few of my friends had to literally carry me back to our room. They weren't nearly as drunk as me. I tend to go a bit overboard with the alcohol, so they all left after making sure I was okay. I was lying on the bed staring at the dark ceiling when this huge migraine started coming on. Despite my drinking habits, I always end up getting migraines afterwards, and that's happened to me for as long as I can remember. So I was just lying there, my head throbbing, absolutely pissed that I had to be experiencing this instead of enjoying myself with my friends. I was tossing and turning for a few minutes when I started hearing this really odd sound. I paused my movement and breathing to listen. I was hearing some weird guttural noise, something that had to have been made by a human or an animal. It really freaked me out. I sat up and looked around the room trying to find the source, and I did. There was a figure in the corner of the room. It was extremely thin, with long fingers, and was so tall its head seemed to be ducking beneath the ceiling. I screamed as loud as I ever had and scrambled backwards, falling out of bed. I reached for the bedside lamp and flicked it on, instantly standing up and looking around the room, horrified. The only thing was, the room was empty. I rubbed my groggy eyes multiple times. The room was still empty. The corner where I had seen that thing was empty. For a second there, I thought I must have been losing my mind. I just sat there trying to gather my bearings before I eventually crawled back into bed and switched off the lamp. I had to just chalk it up to some weird hallucination. I've never had any hallucinations my entire life, with or without migraines, but that was surely the only thing it could be. I was laying on my side, facing away from the corner. But just then, my heart sank as I began hearing the same guttural noise from earlier. I had to sit up and look around the room. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I could see it again. That giant, shadowy figure just lurking in the corner. "What the hell?" I said out loud. Slowly, I noticed the figure seemed to be growing larger. The head was moving across the ceiling inch by inch, and the shoulders were becoming wider and wider. The guttural noise was also getting louder and louder. I just sat, petrified with fear, as I saw two slender arms reaching towards me with long, skeletal fingers. The figure began leading down towards me, and I started to make out a pair of wide, bloodshot eyes gleaming in the darkness. I dove for the bedside lamp and switched it back on, spinning back around in a panic. The room was empty. I wasn't dealing with this anymore. I left the room and ran out onto the deck, and then I called one of my friends, Nicholas. I asked him to come stay in the room with me. He laughed at me at first, but after I made it clear I wasn't joking around, he agreed. I didn't go back into that room until Nicholas was in there with me. He sat on his bed on his laptop as I switched off the lamp and tried to go back to sleep, my head still pounding. The figure was no longer in that corner, and I never saw it again. To this day, I don't know what to make of it. Was it some sort of dream? Sleep paralysis? I still try to tell myself it had to have been some weird, vivid hallucination as a result of my drinking or my migraine. I don't know for sure, though. Nothing like that has ever happened to me before, and I've never heard of it happening to anyone. I'll have to do some more research on it. There was something about that thing's eyes, though. The wide, bloodshot eyes staring right into my soul. I'm never forgetting that vision for as long as I live.